Next on our program, appropriately timed, we have a panel on the opportunity of retail giving. And I'd like to call my panelists up on stage. And our moderator is Sanjeev Joshipura. He is our executive director here at Indiaspora. Sanjeev, welcome to the stage.
Thanks, Gabrielle. So as I'm talking about this panel, I'd like to invite my panelists up on stage. We have Anjali Kochar, who is the executive director of the Kailash Satyarthi Children's Foundation, Rajesh Ramachandran of Deserving Causes, and Lowrey Redmond, who is the chief growth officer of Malaria No More. I'm joined by my immediate left by Anjali, followed by Lowrey immediately after her, and then Rajesh brings up the rear. So thank you all for being part of this panel. This panel is a conversation about retail giving. And I just want to clarify the nomenclature a little bit as I start out. There's two different, for those of you that are steeped in philanthropy, there's two different types of definitions of retail giving. There's retail giving in the sense of several people giving en masse, like we all did this morning on Chalo Give, for example. On the internet, go online, different parts of the world, contribute online, donate, small amounts typically. Then there's another definition, which is more along the lines of actual brick and mortar retail. And by that I mean when you're checking out at your local grocery store or Target or Walmart, the cashier asks you, do you want to donate $3 or $5 to X, Y, and Z cause? Obviously, what we're talking about today is the former, the online retail giving. So just wanted to make that point of clarification for those of you that might be a little bit confused by the terminology. But what we're going to really talk about today is about the perspectives that our panelists, who are all experts in the philanthropic area, bring to online retail giving. Their experience, their plans, why they participated in Chalo Give, and that kind of thing. So let me just kick it off by giving each of my panelists 60 seconds to talk about what each of their organizations does. I'll start with you, Anjali.
Sure. Hello. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Sanjeev, MR, and the entire Indiaspora team for really doing so much work and pulling this together. As Sanjeev said, my name is Anjali Kochar, and I work for the Kailash Satyarthi Children's Foundation here in the US. The foundation was started in 2015 post Kailash's Nobel Peace Prize. And it really is here to scale his lessons learned over the past 40 years of grassroots engagement as well as global policy advocacy. And so the work that the US Foundation is engaged with is supporting raid and rescue, rehabilitation work, the changing of laws and policies in India, but also then working to really mobilize young people to get involved on the issues of child labor, slavery, trafficking, conflict, as well as bringing together Nobel Peace Laureates and world leaders along with youth and thought leaders for really intergenerational dialogues that we hold. And at that, I think I'll leave it.
Kailash ji, Sumedha ji, and you, Anjali, and your team do tremendous work. Thank you for being here. Lowrey, I'll turn it over to you now.
Great, thank you. Good morning, my name is Lowrey Redmond. I'm Chief Growth Officer of Malaria No More. I think many of you may know Martin Edlund, our dynamic CEO, who has attended events with you in the past, so I'm pleased that I get the chance today. Malaria No More was launched in 2006 with President Bush at the White House Summit to end malaria, at the same time that the President's Malaria Initiative began, PMI. We have affiliate organizations and offices around the world in the UK, Japan, Africa, and most recently India, where we have operations in Delhi and Bhubaneswar. Our mission is to ensure that no one dies from a mosquito bite. So we're focused on ensuring that there is the political commitment, funding, and innovations to save lives and end malaria. we believe that the path towards global elimination runs through India. So we started a couple of years of looking specifically at India because we believe it's India's next biggest success story. And I've met with the government leaders, the communities, the ASHA workers, and they believe that we actually have a chance with the right tools and funding and resources to end malaria. So I believe that we together can do this.
Lowrey, I'm very glad you're here today because like you said, I've met your CEO, Martin, on numerous occasions, and the work that your team does is no less than phenomenally inspirational. Thank you.
Thank you.
Last but not least, I have to my extreme left, Rajesh Ramachandran of Deserving Causes. And before I say anything else, let me just say, Rajesh, a big thank you to you and your partners for having produced this video that MR just showed a short while ago.
Yeah.
Really great video. Thank you so much.
So glad.
Over to you, Rajesh.
All right, thank you, Sanjeev. So good morning, all. So my name is Rajesh Ramachandran, and I started Deserving Causes India Foundation a couple of years ago with colleagues from technology and from the film industry. That's the business that we are in. And we are a relatively new entrant to the space, so no means an expert, as Sanjeev had initially alluded to. You're probably talking to the other two panelists on the stage. So what we are trying to do is identifying causes focused in India, but that we can raise awareness and funds using our expertise in film and media and also tech. So our first project is a primary school project for kids that were displaced by the floods in Chennai in 2015. The government, of course, has done something, but there's a lot of work that we could be doing. So that's the project that we are showcasing and hosting on Chalo Give at this point of time. So that's what we do.
Just the very fact, Rajesh, that your organization is a new entrant into this field lends its own perspective to this panel, and we're looking forward to what you and obviously Lowrey and Anjali have to say. But let me start out by just giving each of you a chance. I know each of your organizations, of course, is a participant, such a valuable participant in Chalo Give. Let me just start out by asking each of you why you chose to participate, what you hope to accomplish by being part of Chalo Give.
Yep. So I think for us, it was kind of like a no-brainer, right? For us, there is power in giving, and it's not necessarily the dollar amount, but it's the act of. The act of giving means that the individual is opening themselves up. They're opening themselves up to a particular issue. They're opening themselves up to take action, to become lifelong engagers on a particular issue. And so, we all, I think, collectively are here because we're working on issues that are really all about inequality and the strengthening of human dignity at the end of the day. And this collectively becomes an action that we are engaged in, and we're inviting others to come and join us.
Great.
So we're pleased to also participate for a couple of reasons. As I mentioned, we recently launched our program in India. And when we were thinking of designing the program, we didn't do anything without identifying experts from the India diaspora who could help us design the program. So even from the very beginning, with our board member, Surya Mahapatra, from former Ambassador Rich Verma, and many others, we tapped into the Indian Americans who could help us or lean in mighty. And so as a nonprofit, you obviously work with your large institutional donors, but our first advice from them was, don't try to boil the Indian Ocean. Try to demonstrate impact and then scale. And so from the very beginning, we knew that from our program design and our impact and then the philanthropy that would support us achieve this mission together, we couldn't do it without communities like this. So demonstrating the impact in Odisha, creating a popular movement of India against the mosquito, literally it's a new hashtag of ours, and then culminating in the third sort of prong of our strategy, which is at the national level, political advocacy and will. All of that needs different levels and types of mechanisms to support that. And we believe strongly that it's online giving and communities like this who are investing in the future. We're a leverage organization, so we want to leverage the Odysseus Society of America, who we work with closely, individuals, and communities like this. So we're pleased to be part of a platform.
It's interesting, Lowrey, you use the phrase, don't try and boil the entire Indian Ocean. I've spoken with your colleagues in the past, and the kind of targeted results that you are bringing to bear in states like Odisha, I think is indeed getting the attention of wider policymakers overall in India and other states and at the federal level as well.
Yeah, and I think it'll have an impact with philanthropists, right? I mean, there are large NGOs out there, and sometimes it's very hard to identify where's my dollar going, how to invest. You know, it just seems too big. So organizations like ours, and the way we designed it on the ground, is to really do that, start in certain districts, start with impact models, and really get the traction with the politicians and communities like this. So yeah, that's our whole theory of change, both for implementation and philanthropy.
Fantastic. Rajesh?
So for us, it was about getting a platform to talk about deserving causes because we are new. And we've been involved with Chalo Give even before it had a name. So I've been talking to Gabriel and Ashish about what Chalo Give is. It didn't dawn on me what the power of a zero friction platform for micro retail donations would be until MR did that thing. He did that now. So that was that. So it's a learning experiment for us. So I think it kind of worked. So
awesome. Well, looking forward to seeing the results at the end of this. Hopefully, there'll be a lot more money in the kitty.
Yeah, we should do it at every break. Yeah,
All right. Well, I'm just going to preface. My next question is going to be about the participants' perspectives on retail giving overall, just as a medium of fundraising. But let me preface that by saying a couple of things. So 60% of the Indian diaspora in America right now is between the ages of 20 and 35. 66%, excuse me. Of that 66%, 60% of them had made charitable donations, right? And the amount of charitable donations that were made by individuals in America last year, not just Indians in America or Indian Americans, overall in America, the amount of individual charitable donations last year was $292 billion US. It's a huge amount. Now, the Indian diaspora has twice the average income of the average American, right? So the Indian diaspora tends to be a very successful, fairly affluent community in this country. And so just to think of the power of what that could mean if all of us gave and opened our hearts and our wallets, that could result in very significant impact via some of these fantastic organizations that are participating and others that are in the room today. So talking about retail giving or online giving specifically, my sense is that if an organization engages in online giving as a medium, you open yourself up to another revenue stream, which is basically a younger market and a larger market for obvious reasons, right? Your mega donors are important, of course, and they're few and far between. But as we've seen from political campaigns in the past, just to use one example, retail donations can be equally as powerful, in some ways even more so, because you get sort of a larger name brand recall and a wider reach of your message. You also cultivate future champions because you kind of start them out young typically, and they grow to be maybe your mega donors in the future. Now, having said that, there is the possibility that engaging in a retail donor program from the perspective of the organization that's doing it could be cost inefficient in the sense that you're spending more time cultivating donors who would give less money potentially, right? And so with these pros and cons in mind, I'd just like each of the panelists to provide their perspectives on what they think retail giving can do for their organizations. Start anywhere.
Do you want to start? You start.
All right. I'll make it short. We've had a lot of friends and our social connections telling us that it's hard to donate or hard to pick a cause to donate, and most of the times we find it's issues related to the actual the payment part of it. Very few of these of the causes seem to have the friction-free aspect that I was speaking about, and I think even with Chalogu, we are just scratching the surface of because the tech industry has shown us it's very easy to take money, right? So without even us knowing about it. So that's something that we want to leverage with retail giving. So to see how tech and, of course, the confluence of media to make it simple. So one of the ideas that I was getting as MR was doing this is we do a film and stand-up comedy as fundraising events, but to interject those events with like, pull your phone out now and give, right? So that is making it super easy to give is what's exciting about retail giving to us.
I guess the power of theater, doing it at the moment.
Doing it at the moment, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so we have a lot of experience and a lot of lessons learned and things that have worked and not. We were the first nonprofit that American Idol did Idol Gives Back. So that was sort of how we were launched. We've also done it at a country level. In Zambia with Novartis, we created an online platform called The Power of One. $1, one treatment, one child saved. This is all what my colleague said about $1 actually means that I'm turning you into an ambassador of growth. So it is really hard to manage $1 donations. We all know that from the back end of a nonprofit, and it was painful, but it turned a lot of, we got a lot of ambassadors. And so we do everything from the Facebook giving, the birthdays, and it works, but it's not about, it has not been successful in our past for creating a major revenue stream, but I think that's going to change because to your point, I think that we believe that we can end malaria with the India diaspora, not just from online platforms, but think about the Indian Americans who are the CEOs of companies. Think of the chapters and the communities. If every Indian American diaspora community around the US adopted a village in India, think of just all of that. How can we leverage the networks, the ambassadors, and turn them into a revenue stream in itself, in addition to the online giving? And then one other thing about sort of, we believe strongly in the next gen philanthropist. I had an experience recently too, where we were targeting the parent of the family because they may have had more giving potential, but it became a family giving opportunity. Parents and children wanting to go back to their Orissa home and eliminate malaria. So we're finding this really interesting dynamic about the younger generation who wants hashtags and platforms like this, but then leverage that with the parents who want to be more involved from a traditional way. So we're starting to experiment with lots of different aspects.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we actually have not had a lot of experience with retail giving, but I think from the few times where we have done some retail giving, or where I have at least seen the end result of it, I think what is so incredible is the power of storytelling, actually. And it really comes down to content, to really, really compelling content. Because you can run retail giving campaigns on Twitter, and everybody puts it out there and says, 2 lines and donate. But really what people are responding to, and I think also young people, but actually, even older folks like me, is really they want to see what's happening, right? They want to hear the story of the child who was rescued and their life was transformed. They want to see the impact of the work. And so even though you're exactly right, it's a lot of work, but we bring them in and we start them on this journey of being a change maker, whether it's here or in some other part of the world or in India itself.
No, you're exactly right. I mean, the power of storytelling is really tremendous. And that's what leads to sort of more online giving as time moves on. Let me direct this question specifically to you, Lowrey, as being the organization that is on this stage the most experienced at this moment in retail giving. Talk a little bit, if you would, about the issues that one would face trying to solicit retail donations, i.e., the fact that, you know, people are busy, right? People have their own lives and people don't get around to actually donating despite having the best of intentions. Also, the fact that there is, as MR mentioned a short while ago, a trust deficit that exists in terms of people not knowing what the organization does or how well it does it. Now, that would be very different if you were cultivating an institutional or high net worth donor, because you would go and talk to her or him, sit down in front of them, explain the situation, have several meetings, you know, so it's a lot easier to do it in that scenario than to do it online en masse. How do you overcome some of those challenges?
It's a good question. I don't think we've solved it all, but and it's really hard for us in our general work, not just in India, because, you know, trying to raise money for eliminating malaria in the U.S. is really hard. We don't have malaria in the U.S. anymore, and there's a lot of competing causes. So what we're starting to do is I love the introduction about targeted strategic philanthropy. I start off by saying we do targeted strategic implementation, and so we're really trying to bring that into our philanthropy. And it's really hard to, you know, beat out all the other hashtags and the causes and all of that. But what we're trying to do is to create the online platforms or regional efforts that sort of have a targeted audience, but en masse. So again, if you go to the Bay Area and you identify the communities there, what are some larger targeted online giving or events or ways that we can almost bring people together, create a community that can work with us? So in online giving, your website is amazing. What we can do with it is great, because you sort of what you have to do is quickly compel them that our missions and our visions are aligned. And then it's compelling storytelling, it's understanding the audience. And so not going out to the whole world with one mass campaign, but really trying to segment the audience and then have that compelling vision. And then a lot of it has to do with building your reputational capital, going on. Everybody goes online, unless it's in a format like this, give $5. But we get a lot of larger donations because they check us out in Charity Gives or Giving Well. And so making sure that your organization is set up so that somebody could do a quick vetting of it is important. So those are some of our lessons learned.
Thank you. Informative for everybody here today on the topic concerned. So, Rajesh, let me turn to you. You know, you were talking about your work in media production, film distribution, and those areas. Talk to us a little bit, if you would, about what you think the power of that medium can be in terms of galvanizing further retail giving. Because Lowrey and Anjali have talked about storytelling. Seems to me, you know, what better way to tell a story than using the assets that you have? Absolutely.
Let me first address the challenge that we have is that, and this might be just an aspect of the Indian diaspora, is that when we try to get them out to a cost-based entertainment, they absolutely are looking for the entertainment part. They don't want to be bombarded with the cost aspect of it. So we've really had bomb shows where we were showing them a lot of these sad visuals, you know, trying to see if that would encourage them to do it, had the negative effect. They're like, we are here for an evening of fun. Yes, we would you know, donate at the end, but don't like bore us with that. So that's what we got. So the entertainment aspect of it is very important. So if you're able to weave in the storytelling with a very upbeat tone to all of it, it seems to work better.
Great, fantastic. Anjali, let me ask you, I mean, obviously you work extremely closely and have been doing so for a long time now with a person who eventually became a Nobel laureate. And Kailash is such a humble individual. He said so many times about how he could not believe that he had won the Nobel Prize when he actually did. But the work that he does and has done has been path-breaking. But I know that you are early in your journey in terms of online and retail giving, as you mentioned. But I just wonder whether the power of having a brand ambassador like Kailash, who has won a Nobel Prize and who is known all over the world, would be a specific asset to an organization like yours to galvanize retail giving.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a good question. And I do think that there is that name recognition. But, at the end of the day, it's all about relationship, right? Like, let's be very clear. Whether it's institutional giving or whether it's retail giving, we're still needing to create a relationship with the person on the other side. And it all comes down to people. And so, Kailash does have name recognition, but there is still not an awareness of the magnitude of the problem, right? There are 152 million children who are working right now. And they are not in school, and they are not free. And so whether with institutional giving, you still have to fit into the boxes that people have. And with retail giving, we still have to connect the dots. We still have to create a relationship, nurture that relationship for people to become those ongoing champions and change makers. And we need to help them understand whatever the issue is that we're asking them to get engaged with, how it affects them, how it affects their community, and how it affects the life of our global family. I mean, and I think, to Lowrey, to your point about malaria not being prevalent in the US, it's that, when you say, well, we work on child labor problems, well, that's an issue that's over there. And so because it's over there, it's not ours. And actually, I think for all of us sitting in this room, whether we're working on access to healthcare, whether we're working on education, whether we're working on malnutrition or feeding children, they're our children, regardless of where they live, right? And so that's the piece that we have to help everybody understand.
I am my brother's keeper. I am my sister's keeper.
Yep.
So I do want to turn it over to the audience for about 10 minutes. I'm sure there's several questions before we get into our coffee break. Let's go into the open floor. Any questions from the audience? There's one over there in the middle of the room. Could we pass the microphone, please? Please identify yourself before you ask the question. Thank you.
Rahul Saxena from Vision Spring. And the question is directed toward the adopt a village idea, because I think that has worked very well for us. And I just want to understand how you think it can be scaled up.
Sure. That's a good question, and we haven't started it yet, so I'd love to learn from your successes. So it's come up from us in a adopt a panchayat idea, and because it's a way for us to, like we're saying, direct the attention to see the impact of the work. And so how do you take communities in the US, whether it's through the Seattle chapter of the Odisha Society of America, and everybody asks, like, where's my money going? What's the impact? And sometimes the global or national scale of eliminating malaria is really hard. And you also don't know, by adopting a village or a panchayat, you're actually working on all levels. So you're making sure that the government leaders and the community leaders, and so we're thinking of having, and actually our team on the ground thinks that it's a fantastic idea, because we're actually, we're trying to influence the change makers in India, the politicians, the advocates, to support this cause. So to see that there are institutional foundations, that there's communities in the US, that there's momentum for this, will actually help galvanize our goals. So so we're thinking of having it, we're doing district models. And so we're doing district models in the sense of showing the evidence of impact, but we don't want to just show the evidence, we want to show the connection, the people connection of why we should invest in the government, community leaders, and the families and children there.
Lowrey, you talked about the global scale of eliminating malaria, and you mentioned Zambia a short while ago in your opening remarks. That sort of prompts me to ask another question, and this is for anyone on the panel really quickly before I move into other audience questions. I know there are several of them. Obviously, today we are talking about galvanizing philanthropy by the Indian diaspora, but some of you have experiences with other countries, global diaspora, lots of other different nations in different parts of the world. Is there anything that you think that the Indian diaspora can learn from the other experiences that you've had with people in other countries?
That's a good question. Anyone else on the panel?
just food for thought. Just food for thought.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of great lessons learned from corporates and private sector, in the sense of finding common vision and sort of the leverage of what they do in a community, and creating enabling environments. So private sector coming together at a table to have a leadership role, right? So if leading private sector can come together and incentivize other local corporates, we can almost do that as individuals as well, right? So trying to not have one company, one individual, one diaspora group work on their own. How do we sort of create this momentum to bring either leading governments together, the US government, the UK government, Global Fund, convening stakeholders is what we do. So how can we actually learn from what it takes to bring governments together to fund health around the world? How can we bring diaspora together and private sector together to be just as leading change makers in the world? So I think that I'll think a little bit more about this, but I think we actually can learn from it.
Thank you. Just food for thought out there as we're moving through the day. Other questions? I see a question here in the center of the room again, Shefali Mehta.
Hi. Oh, hi. So you actually started answering the question that I had, which is, and this might be throughout the whole summit, but are there ways to actually start to leverage different causes? So you hit on the fact that it's an overwhelming amount of places where we can donate. Even just going on Cello Give in the short you already have up, it's almost, so you either end up in, I feel like, extremes. You feel like you try to help with everything, then you dilute your support and you feel really thin, or you try to pick one and that's really where you double down on the donor side. But have you looked at, or are there interesting ways of actually, yes, building in stakeholders, but actually leveraging causes differently? Yeah. So crossing across things, and could you talk more to that?
I'll hit this quickly and then hand it over. We try to do this all the time. We talk about malaria as a force multiplier. When you have the Sustainable Development Goals and we're trying to solve water, sanitation, health, education, economic growth, why would all of you fund malaria in a small community in India? Because what we're trying to do is by integrating and showing how the impact of malaria can actually help health systems and unlock the potential of education and economic growth, we should not be working on our own causes alone. We need to show the integrated impact of, the chain of effect of solving malaria, keeping kids in school, economic potential, women's empowerment. And so that's usually how we talk to donors, unless we know that someone is really compelled by Cyclone Fani just hit, displaced populations, monsoon is coming, let's go in hard with malaria. But really it's mostly about the integrated nature of by what our solutions do for malaria can also unlock the potential across other causes.
Let not a crisis go to waste in some cases.
Yeah. I mean, just to build on what Lowrey was saying, I think I think that these issues that we're all working on are completely interlinked, right? We actually do need to address all of them. And so in terms of donors, you know, what I've always said just to individual donors is it can be overwhelming, right? And there's so much out there. And so I'm taking off my hat, right, of Kailash Satyarthi Children's Foundation and just talking to you guys as an individual. I think it's up to us, where we have to find the issue that speaks to our inner being. Because there is that in each one of us. There is something that ignites our passion. And that's where we should go. Knowing that if I'm working and if I'm funding, if I'm contributing this issue, it is actually going to have an impact in other places. Now putting my hat back on. So some of our work on the ground in India through our child-friendly villages is exactly what Lowrey is talking about. It's, you know, looking at village development, but through children's rights. And while we're there working with the village, we're actually looking at children's empowerment. We're looking at access to education. We're looking at malnutrition. We're looking at immunizations. We're looking at water and sanitation, because that's actually the only way this is going to work, is if we are holistic in what it is that we're doing. And so I will just say one thing about the Sustainable Development Goals. I realize that that's not why we're here, but we've just finished up a week, last week, at the UN General Assembly. And as we all know, the Sustainable Development Goals have a deadline of 2030, right? And we are starting to look at where we are with each of those goals. And actually what doesn't get talked about much is that we have one goal that has an earlier deadline than all the other goals. And that's target 8.7 on the elimination of child labor by 2025. And the world community came together and they agreed on this early deadline, because if our children aren't free, they actually can't access education. And if our children aren't free, they can't access healthcare. So these are really all completely interrelated. So find your passion.
Awesome advice, Anjali. I'll take two more questions before we run out of time. There's one question here in the right of the room, and there's one in the left back of the room. If you want to take those questions together, and then the panel can address them jointly.
This is Nitin from Kolkata Foundation. Rajesh, you particularly mentioned that we should leverage the power of technology for frictionless giving. I wonder if you can share your ideas and thoughts that while leveraging technology for frictionless giving, how can we reduce the cost of giving? Because as you said, if you're looking at $1 donation, there are, other than the 3% cost, there are transaction costs which eat up half your donation. So how can you leverage that power and reduce the cost of retail donations?
Great question.
No, go ahead if you want to address it.
That's one of the questions I was trying to get answered by participating today is the approach of aggregation, like Cello Give, for example, where there's a whole bunch of causes there that people could search and then decide what to donate to. Is that the future? Because there's also the benefit of the verified, the blue tick mark effect that something like Cello Give passes on to the charities it supports. But there's the other thought is, are there ethical ways for us to profile, let's say, the Indian diaspora? Because as everybody here is saying, that to find out what is the cost that is going to evoke giving in a certain person, right? So it might be malaria for somebody, it might be education for somebody else. There are questionable ways of doing that. Facebook has shown us how to do that, but are there ethical ways of doing that? Is another way to explore, so that we can hit people with the right message at the right time and take from them. So.
And one last question, we'll make it quick, please. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm Suresh Shenoy. I'm president of Wheels Global Foundation. I was also chairman of the National Capital Chapter of the Red Cross. And we have had a lot of experience at the Red Cross for this retail giving. But unfortunately, it happens to be very episodic. Like we get together here today and, there's something that flashes on the screen and you give money, or if there is a disaster and you give money. The one model that I've seen that works and results in sustained giving, which is the big challenge that most of us have as not-for-profits, is payroll deductions with matching gifts from the corporation itself. For that, you need a platform like United Way, which has established a brand which has unfortunately been tarnished somewhat. But someone like Indiaspora has that opportunity to become that United Way brand for the Indian diaspora in the United States to give on a sustained basis through payroll deductions and get the corporates that they work for to make matching donations. I would recommend, MR and you, Sanjeev, as a takeaway that while Chalo Gives is a great initiative, that if you can sort of scale it to a corporate level and have that United Way type of approach, because one of the challenges we also have is compliance, particularly FCRA when you want to transfer that money to India. And that is becoming increasingly difficult for individual NGOs to get and keep. So that's one of the recommendations I have, and I just want to use that as a question if anyone has had those problems of sustained fundraising.
Excellent point, Suresh. Just very quickly, so I think there's two things to that, right? One is the episodic nature of giving, where you galvanize giving in a week or a day, which has its place. And then there's more sustained giving, like you were talking about, payroll deductions and so forth, which I think is something that certainly a platform like ours, others should explore. So I think that's a great suggestion. Thank you. Any of the panelists that want to address that?
No, we just agree. We do a lot of employee giving programs that have corporate matches. So I think those are some great ideas about not doing it just within one corporate, like Goldman Gives or something like that, but finding a way to tap into it as a larger movement. So.
And as part of Chalo Give, we have approached several corporations as well to kind of talk to their own Indian diaspora employees, large corporations on the West Coast and so forth to, galvanize the giving. But I still get your point. It's episodic, not sustained. So thank you for that. Well, please join me in giving my panelists a big round of applause.